what you're seeing here, these are actually real-time probability curves aggregating 5 times a second, so 200 millisecond snapshots against that processing speed. Okay, give me an analysis of this, and it did a lot of what I was doing as an analyst for 7 years in 30 seconds. Is this a dead end? And we say, all right, lesson learned. Let's go back to the next thing. There's an excitement and a danger. The excitement being, wow, lots of new ideas, lots of exciting opportunities that I could build on top of this stuff that just showed up. But as well, it's ephemeral. I argue that's the wrong answer. That's a great way to spend a lot of money for no return.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Devico Breakfast Bar. Here we speak with different people involved in the business landscape, share their expertise, delve into the latest tech trends, and explore the ins and outs of IT outsourcing. I'm Oleg Sadikov, and today I'm excited to have Scott Jones, a seasoned leader with over 2 decades of expertise in product development, VP of Product at Realeyes. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss new episodes. Hi, Scott.
Hi, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. Could you start by telling us about your professional background?
Sure. I won't go too far back into history, but for college, I studied economics and film. Didn't really have a plan of where that would lead me. I was an analyst for several years out of school, including management consulting and economic consulting, and then a sort of internal management consulting role at a nonprofit healthcare provider in New York City. And then I moved to Los Angeles and joined a technology company. And that really set the path for me. I got onto the search engine marketing team at an internet yellow pages company, got really deep into SQL as an autodidact. And one day they kind of knighted me a product manager. They said, you should be a product manager. I had no idea what that meant, but it was my destiny. Very happy that worked out. Since then, I've worked in a variety of domains, typically at the intersection of leading edge technologies, data science, and AI. So that started with programmatic large-scale digital marketing, and then ad tech, MarTech, Internet of Things. I'm working on cloud businesses at Lenovo and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise at the intersection of hardware and software, marketplaces, and now computer vision.
That's amazing. So for over 2 decades, you're acting as a product.
So I've been around officially for product. It's been about 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah, but the other things were related. It's interesting, like product management has a bunch of muscles you can kind of flex, and the analysis work for sure is one of them. And then a lot of the work I was doing as an analyst centered around technology evaluations and deployments.
Could you provide an overview of the current project you're actively involved in with Realeyes and elaborate on the specific challenges or issues it addresses?
Yeah, is it cool to do demos?
You can try.
Okay, let's see what happens. Do you see my screen?
Yes, I do.
Cool. So Realeyes is as I mentioned, a computer vision company. I apologize for the very ugly desktop to the right of my screen. So the company was founded in 2007. And for the past decade, the core business has centered around attention and emotion studies in the context of advertising. So imagine working on behalf of brands or agencies. We would help de-risk media spend by testing variations of ads for the optimal attention and emotion engagement of your target audience. So you can imagine we might deliver an insight that for the audience of women with children with credit scores of 750 who drive hybrids, for the optimal attention and emotion engagement, you should run on TikTok the version of the ad with the red car, the female hero, and the third call to action. On YouTube, you should run this other version that performed differently for that channel and that audience. So what I own, I was hired in the fall of 2022 to lead a platform play you can imagine is extending away from that core advertising business. And the concept of the platform is to enable very simple plug and play of our market leading vision AI models so that customers and partners can solve problems with our market leading models that were never really possible before at digital scale. What you're seeing on my screen right now is a demo app using one of our SDKs. Some interesting things to note. First off, it is using the same video stream we're using on this call, and there's no impact to the call or me as a user. As well, the Vision AI models are running locally inside of this application on my machine, and again, no impact. Very, very lightweight models that are extremely fast and performant. Depending on the platform, they are processing on the client side between 25 to 36 frames per second. And what you're seeing here, these are actually real-time probability curves aggregating 5 times a second, so 200 millisecond snapshots against that processing speed, which leads to extremely fast responses. So if I can calm my face, and if I smile, you see it immediately goes to 100%. If I look surprised, similarly, immediate 100% probability. And then for attention, our neural networks are actually looking for signs of inattention. So if I take a sip, or if I turn my head from the screen, and then for mobile, eyes on screen can be relevant. So my first 6 months were spent working on this platform strategy, trying to find scrappy startups. That was the profile we were going after. And the challenge we found in the fall of 2022 was that startups were really struggling. They weren't innovating like they were before. They were mostly trying to stay alive. And that led to a very interesting pivot that I will demo to you now. We actually expanded our portfolio to include face verification. And that was in response to an opportunity with a consumer app company and an RFI. And we won that opportunity. And after adding this new competency of face verification to our portfolio, in addition to attention and emotion, we're wondering what other problems could we solve with this? And because of our work in market research and consumer insights research on the advertising business, we ourselves have seen a steady rise in fraud online. So bots, click farms, people pretending to be who they're not. And we had the realization that we could use this new technology competency that we've established to solve that problem. And that has really comprised my past year. And I'll show you an example of this. The demo I'm about to show is mimicking the experience of an end user panelist in online research. So let's pretend I am that panelist. So here, the concept of the demo is I am being invited to participate in a survey. Let's pretend it's travel. And as I go into this survey, I am being presented with a GDPR compliant consent we've developed for this sort of biometric evaluation. It will describe what's about to happen and give me access to a privacy policy. So it's describing the biometric process. It's giving me access to a privacy policy and a contact if I want to withdraw my consent or ask questions. And so I consent to this, and now our technology is asking for camera permission as a native browser notification. I give that permission. So it is now capturing an image off my camera, sending it to an endpoint hosting our model. There, the model has calculated what a face embedding. You can think about that as the unique math of my face. And in this collection travel for that theme of a survey, it has verified my face is unique to that collection. And just showcasing how we can do demographic validation on the fly. So able to pass back age and gender estimations. So you could imagine if my profile in online research said that I'm a woman age 20, you could immediately tell that's probably not the case. So now imagine if you can conceptualize what just happened as a gate in front of that survey. I went through the gate once, now I'm back on the outside. And let's pretend a common situation in online research. I'm a bad actor. I've got multiple accounts pretending to be different people. So let's pretend I've logged into another account pretending to be someone else, and that account's been invited to do this same travel survey. So again, I will be presented with that GDPR compliant consent we've developed. And again, it will capture an image off my camera. I'm sending an image off my camera to that endpoint, and it is comparing my face embedding, the unique math of my face, to existing faces in that collection. And they're able to say that's a duplicate user. And the interesting thing with this is I'm about to show you the telemetry we're able to provide on quality on the fly using that gate you just saw. So we're able to identify 3 flavors of quality. The first is acceptable, where a user is verified as unique to a collection, and if age and gender is passed to us, we can verify it. The second is low quality, where it's extremely likely that they're humans, but they are not complying with the process. We have air handling in place. If I can't see you, I show you, like you saw in the demo, it couldn't find my camera. But if I can't see you with the camera on, I will show you an image of what I can see with a call to action to make yourself visible. And we give the user 3 tries by default. This is the cohort where after 3 tries, they're still not visible. Generally, it's from audits we've done, it's non-compliance, like blocking or dodging. And then finally, the cohort of fraud, which is inclusive of bots, duplicates, as you just saw in the demo. For our redirect solution, we can detect if users are trying to hack our link, and then demographic mismatches where age and gender is passed to us, but we cannot validate it. And the interesting thing there is an existing category for identity, but the challenge is, and face verification, but the challenge is they were built for banks and governments. So it's a very heavy lift for everyone involved. The user provides a government ID and a selfie. Those technologies will verify, is that a real passport? Does it belong to Scott Jones in Chapel Hill? If it does, do I think the selfie's the same person? Heavyweight for everyone involved and priced accordingly, where it can be $1 or more for check. And what you just saw, we're offering it at 10 cents per check. And in the market research space, that's been very disruptive already. Consumer insights as well, that research space, and very compelling for the economics of it. So that's the first vertical I'm going after right now. And then other verticals are on my mind, like ticketing, where you have a huge problem with bots and click farms, content moderation, where keeping children out of age restricted content, for example, marketplaces, the sharing economy, where there's lots of people pretending to be who they're not, and bad actors trying to create multiple accounts. Maybe they get kicked off and they try to come back. So really what we found is we've invented a new lightweight identity category that isn't even officially kind of acknowledged right now.
Scott, that's really amazing. Thanks for the demo. You have navigated both startup environments and global enterprises. What are some key differences you have noticed in terms of fostering innovation and product development?
Yeah, there's many angles to approach it from. So one is what I've learned from working at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, Lenovo, and another gigantic enterprise called BASF is, as you'd expect, as the organizations grow over time, over decades, there becomes layers and layers of management, and with good intention, they're trying to mitigate risks. They don't want to destroy their business by making decisions that haven't been completely counterbalanced. So innovation at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, for example, I was hired to essentially invent a new as a service business model that didn't exist in Hewlett Packard Enterprise portfolio yet. And one key thread of that was inventing a new type of SKU. So it's a hardware company. The SKUs are tied to hardware. I had to do a lot of research and networking to find how can I create a SKU that is credits based for cloud consumption. And after figuring out there is a path for that, I had to go through what's called an MPI process, which is kind of a new product introduction sort of cadence where you have trains that are constantly leaving the station with like 3 to 6 months in advance looking for the destination you're trying to arrive to with a launch. And it's incumbent on you as the product manager driving that to form a steering committee representative of all the pieces of the puzzle of that hardware company. So it's legal, it's finance, it's supply chain, it's the procurement systems, it's sales, training and enablement, it's channel partners, it's pricing, it's all these things. You have to assemble this steering committee, have a giant PowerPoint you produce saying you've checked all the boxes they need, and you bring this steering committee along for the ride on that 3 to 6 month voyage to the destination, the target release you're trying to hit. And just as I describe it now, you can imagine that's a lot of overhead. That's a lot of fingers in the pie, a lot of cooks in the kitchen who can kind of grab your baby and steer it off course and say, nope, we can't keep going. You need to solve that. That's the kind of enterprise vibe. As I said, it makes sense. You have to be mindful of risk. You don't want to launch something that's going to compromise your business, that you can't fulfill, that's going to get you in legal trouble, etc. On the startup side, the exciting thing and potentially the scary thing is you don't have that steering committee. You might have a leadership team. You might have your boss. They can help define kind of the sandbox you're playing in and say, you're empowered to figure this out, which is exciting. And along the way, it means you get to wear many of the hats of that steering committee I described before at a giant enterprise. I get to think about pricing. In fact, I define pricing every day as a function of margin and competitive intelligence, et cetera. Legally, I go to our general counsel or the product manager on my team does. We say, we're trying to innovate. And the thing you just saw, like that's very leading edge, that face verification system. that's completely anonymous and deployed kind of in the open internet to keep bots and click farms out. No one's ever done that before. So we're like looking through the lens of GDPR. Here's my take on it. What do you think? And being able to do that asynchronously on Slack, not having to go through like months of process. All the other things like marketing, sales, I'm doing all of that myself, putting together those materials, ideating on it, getting feedback, not going through these organizations that have been established over decades. So the balance is you get to wear many hats in the startup world. You get to take on as much as you want to drive innovation. The interesting dynamic on the enterprise side is I'm often hired, or I have been empirically, by those companies because they want people with those startup chops who can help them think differently, be more, to use the buzzword, agile. And the challenge is you can go pretty far, but you might get slapped on the hand. You say, no, 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 you can't do that. You need this stakeholder to do that for you. But you can also disrupt it. So, for example, at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, we were compartmentalized. It's like the product team can only live in this world. You can only do these things. We went to the marketing team to try to build a microsite for this new as a service storage business we were building. And to work with them would take months, maybe even years. So we went rogue and we built our own microsite as a landing page that we could use. And that led to some hand slapping, but later led to the realization like, hey, these guys know what they're doing. And it led to our business unit being kind of elevated to a grander as a service play for the entire storage business unit. I hope that made sense or any clarifying questions, but
That makes sense. It seems to me that you're doing too much for one person. Sad that it's only 24 hours in a day, no?
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's exciting for sure. And you learn so much. So Realize in particular is a hardcore technology company. 2/3 of the company are engineers and scientists, which means the team I have driving what you just saw, our new Verify product, is about 5 people total, and 3 of them are engineers. One of them's a one of them is a product manager on my team. So I am sales, marketing, business development, partnerships. I'm all those things, which is super exciting. But as you mentioned, you're always thinking, wow, do I need to sleep? Can I figure that out right now? Or is that a thing for tomorrow? Yep.
In your experience, what does it mean to bring a startup mindset to a big corporation and why it is important in today's business landscape?
Yeah, I think it's this idea of one theme that I took away from working at enterprises is you have a glacial mindset. You're at the start of your project. You have a view of where you want to be, and the view of where you want to be could be like 9 months from now. It could be a year from now. In some projects, it could be like a 2 to 3 year plan, and it moves very, 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 very slowly. And the challenge is, did you do all your kind of de-risking up front? Did you do all the right discovery? Do you even know you're building something people want, or are you just building something that kind of internally seems like a really good idea, which is a common pitfall for enterprises and startups? And then with that, you are committing to this thing where you're probably not going to deliver anything for 9 months or a year or maybe 2 years. And the challenge there is, as I'm sure you know as a technologist, you set on that path, you commit to it, you start funding it, you don't see any value delivery. And meanwhile, the market of your competitors and maybe adjacent markets where you could kind of take innovation, inspiration from, or reusable parts is moving in much faster cycles and delivering value, getting feedback, iterating, and focusing, converging on a validated path. Meanwhile, you haven't seen anything. You've committed to this project. You've got nothing coming out of it. That is the common challenge and a very simple distillation of it. So bringing that startup mindset, why I've been valued is number one, in an enterprise, a lot of your peers will have come up in that environment. They've spent their whole career working on hardware, working on the business as it always is. They've got this kind of institutional muscle memory. This is the way we do it. This is how things work. They want to bring in people who say, no, 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 well, let's rethink about that. So like that example of Hewlett Packard Enterprise, part of my work to invent that new credit system was taking a machete to empirical processes and like cutting them down and saying, you don't need that. No, we don't need to do that. Think about it this way. There's a faster path. Another thing is to the mindset of not committing to glacial projects, but rather thinking in very small increments. Like, what's the least I have to do to validate that this is worth pursuing? And thinking whether it's thinking in terms of sprints or just like baby steps on the path to your vision. I don't want to even commit to this long. I just want to go this far. Like, how can I validate that the outcome of that sprint will solve the problems we're trying to solve? And from that, can I have like a go or no go sort of decision of, do we keep going? Do I turn a little bit left based on the signals we saw? Or is this a dead end? And we say, all right, lesson learned. Let's go back to the next thing. That mindset often doesn't exist. And that's why startup sort of experiences can be very valuable. But at the same time, you're not going to be able to burn down all this empirical sort of bureaucracy and muscle memory. You're just going to try to push and affect change.
How can established companies cultivate a culture of innovation and risk-taking similar to that found in startups while still maintaining operational stability and efficiency?
A common refrain I've seen about this, and true in my own experience, is to start small. Maybe it's formally deploying a sort of innovation lab team, or having a product manager or a similar sort of persona who says, you know what, let's demonstrate that you can innovate differently than we are now, and maybe even not getting formal permission to do so, but you frame it that way and you operate that way. So the idea of whether it's formally stood up, this is our innovation lab, or that sort of entrepreneurial persona saying, I'm going to demonstrate we can operate this way. You take that sort of smaller mindset of your backlog of ideas of what innovation you can drive, your ability to prioritize that as a function of how hard it is and what expected ROI you're going to get from it. Time boxing these efforts, so going from R&D on these ideas to, is there something really that we can do there? Time boxing that discovery, having a gated checkpoint, saying, yeah, it looks like we spent a week experimenting with this. We built a prototype. It looks like there's something there. We should keep going. Or no, we spent a week checking that out, and that violates the laws of physics. That's impossible. Put it back. Let's learn from it. From those ideas where you do the R&D, then getting into, great, let's do a time box test of this. Let's get the kind of buzzword MVP, but truly what is like the minimal version of this that we can get out to test that there's value there, and then get that out and see if it hits our hypotheses and the KPIs we're looking to get at. And again, a gated checkpoint. We did this time boxed smaller scale deployment. Here's what we hoped would happen or expected to happen. Here's what did happen. Does that mean we should scale it, or does that mean this is dead, or does that mean we learned something and figure out a new way to a new direction to go? And doing all of that and that sort of mindset, rather than the typical process of, we're going to commit to this for 3 months or a quarter and hope that, or a year, and hope that at the end of it, it's something valuable. It's that sort of mindset, I would argue.
How do you see the future of AI evolving in the business world, and what opportunities and challenges do you anticipate as AI technologies continue to advance?
One angle is, well, if you look through the lens of the classic sort of triangle of people, process, and technology, process side, a lot of redundant work can go away. Like, I will never forget when I worked at this nonprofit healthcare provider in New York. I had joined maybe a year or a couple years after they switched to completely paperless filing. So they used to have like armies of people who were filing paper into folders and putting them into file cabinets, and that was their job. All of those people were gone. Just a quick analogy for similarly this idea of various sort of processes where you have either people deployed or people spending a lot of their time doing it, you won't need to do. The
For
scarier part,
example, what types of roles will disappear?
it's interesting, like research roles. I have a lot of friends who are lawyers, but I guess I don't entirely know enough about the legal domain to completely back up what I'm about to say. But it feels like large language models could take a lot of the work away that's required from legal processes. I just saw a demo of the latest GPT 4.0 where a user submitted a spreadsheet and said, like, hey, give me an analysis of this. And it did a lot of what I was doing as an analyst for 7 years in 30 seconds. A lot of that where it said, oh, cool, here's the data set. Let me parse it into interesting visualizations. And here's bullet points of the key takeaways. Stuff like
I
that.
also did the same after the presentation, but I gave it a little bit longer and bigger file, I would say, and the results were not good enough, I
Yeah,
would say.
I've heard the same where you like all to say it's not ready right now where you can say, hey, all of
It's
you
far
employees.
away from, they only show you on ideal scenario where they prepared everything, trained it, I don't know. Otherwise, if you just feed it the, I would say, crude file,
Mhm.
bigger file, or something like from the real life, I would say, in 99% of cases you will not get expected results.
Yep. But I would argue even that, if we draw kind of an analog to the first instantiations of Gen AI video from maybe a year ago, where it's, I don't know, that doesn't look very good. And now to see where it's at now, I would imagine similar advancement, which then leads to, like, if we just take that sort of idea of what you see today is going to be radically different. The time scale of the acceleration of the innovation is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, which leads to another challenge kind of baked into your question where you don't have stable ground to stand on. So this idea of these new models are being released, and for certainly for the past 2 years, we've seen, if I can like draw a architecture in the sky right now, these new models are being released as a foundational layer. And then a bunch of startups and potentially even enterprises are saying, oh, I can build a solution on top of that, like a wrapper, and I can sell that. And you say, cool, I've got firm ground now. I've built this sort of business predicated on a wrapper using these foundational elements. And then what do you know? The company providing those foundational elements does a very typical strategic move and says, hey, our latest release, we solve all the problems of a lot of these wrappers that were just built, or we've provided new functionality. Those businesses you just built are completely irrelevant now. There's a danger there. There's an excitement and a danger. The excitement being, wow, lots of new ideas, lots of exciting opportunities that I could build on top of this stuff that just showed up. But as well, it's ephemeral. Like what you're building on is about to evolve and radically change. But then what you think the value you have of what you're building is also ephemeral because the advancements are so fast, it'll probably subsume what you just did. So it's like very tricky strategically.
Agree. With increasing adoption of AI in various industries, what advice would you give to businesses looking to incorporate AI into their operations for the first time?
Yeah, I think it would tie into what we were just saying. Well, there's, I guess, evolving talking points or thoughts about it depending on what the use case is. So I'll start with like large language models. The kind of zeitgeist of the past year has been, just from my own networking and pressure testing ideas with other industry figures, is you could use previous instantiations of ChatGPT to drive your own large language model utilization at your business, but you might find the economics of it don't work. You might find it's not specific enough to your domain, and you might ultimately evolve towards, this was great for us as a sandbox to learn and like build POCs, but the next level for us is we need to build, train, manage, and deploy our own large language models that are tied to our domains. And that leads to a dichotomy. So when I pressure test this with some people, they say, well, that's not for everybody. A lot of businesses should not do that. And I agree. So for some businesses where that is relevant to them, that's going to be what's probably going to happen. You're not just going to use the publicly available stuff everyone else is using. But for others, they're going to want just plug and play, do it for me. I don't need a specialized thing. I don't need the largest, the best of the best. I just need something that can solve these discrete problems for me. So that's one dynamic. Another dynamic is, I guess it would be thinking about it as an evolutionary mindset. And you don't want to, and you wouldn't be able to just kind of pull a lever and say, all right, tomorrow morning we're an AI company. Like, but rather being discrete and calculated on what problems to solve, what are the highest value ones, what are maybe decisions you can test and scale and roll out versus what are those where there's no going back? What are those where it is kind of that idea of, I have an army of people that I'm paying to file papers in file cabinets. Maybe that is one where you just pull a lever and say, now we're in this new era. I don't need that. I don't need to spend money on that anymore. Versus, hey, we found this really shiny object AI solution. It can do this really cool thing. I plug it into my business. And tomorrow, a better one just came out that even solves more problems, but I've already committed to this. I've already kind of incorporated it to a point where it'd be very hard to undo that. And I've painted myself into a corner. All to say, small bits and thinking about it very strategically with a a mind and an eye for the fact that what you're doing now could rapidly change and evolve away from what you thought you were getting. And now there might be something better and you're already committed.
Transitioning to discussion on IT outsourcing, how do you see the trend of IT outsourcing evolving in the future, particularly in light of factors such as globalization, remote work, and advances in technology?
It's interesting. I think it's just gotten a lot more mainstream with Google's restructuring they did a couple weeks ago. Not necessarily IT, but just normalizing the idea of you can consolidate shared services. I can't remember the exact functions they were. Let's pretend it was things like finance and marketing. I can't remember exactly, but saying, all right, we're going to take these resources that were in pretty expensive regions, now bring them all to South America. I can't even remember if that's the right geo, but all to say, I think Google doing that is putting a pretty big line in the sand, not too different from like the 90s in the US with the NAFTA treaty that led to outsourcing a lot of our production in the US to cheaper markets. My take, what Google just did, they're probably normalizing the same for large technology companies. And you might expect that to become a more popular move. In my own experience, I've had great success working with offshore teams in India, in China, Argentina, Brazil, probably more that I can't think of. And it just makes sense. This idea of you can get top tier talent. Oh, like also Portugal, I'm now remembering. The idea that you can get, oh, and Ukraine. So all over the world, the idea that you can get top tier talent who can solve problems like you're trying to solve, but at a much cheaper price point than if you were hiring them in the Bay Area or New York City or now n number of very expensive markets in the US. It's a very compelling proposition, but there are challenges to it and pitfalls that need to be managed.
For example,
Yeah, language can be one. So when I first started working with offshore teams early in my product career, I was working with teams in India and I was first in California where the time difference with India was really big. So we would have asynchronous communications and then we'd try to have a live demo at a very inconvenient time for one of us. And on those demos, it would become clear that they didn't understand my requirements. And we didn't know until the demo already happened. So it's like, all right, I've lost those 2 weeks in essence to work that was directionally kind of going where I wanted, but not hitting the target. So then it's like, well, how do I de-risk that? How do we work together to better refine the communication so that I can better understand and de-risk that what I'm saying is what they're understanding? So that was one challenge that I've learned to mitigate. And that pertains to all cultures where what you say to how you communicate ideas to an Israeli or a someone in China or someone in Ukraine, someone in Europe, someone in South America, it's not always the same. You have to kind of figure out like culturally, how do they interpret the world? How do they see things? How do they understand things? How do they think about technology? So there's a learning process and it's not always, this applies to everyone. Another challenge can be the simple managing aspects of it. Can you rely on sort of if you have your point contact, like your technical lead for the team, can you rely on them that they're getting the best out of their team? And how would you know if they're not? How do they know if they're not? In past experience, I've had cases where we had to call out to the tech lead, hey, this guy on your team, he's not doing what he's saying he's doing. He keeps showing up to our stand ups saying, oh, I haven't done that yet. I'll do it tomorrow. And it's like, well, he said that now over the course of weeks. Like, what is he doing? If you were not working remotely, if you had the team on site and you could just walk over to their cube and say, like, that guy's not doing his job. When it's remote and they're in a different time zone, it can be more challenging and harder to kind of, I'm not saying you want to go choke them, but harder to kind of shake the tree and say, what's that guy doing? It's just not as easy.
what are the key differences in the approach to IT outsourcing between startups and large corporations, and how do these differences impact in selection the outsourcing partners?
So it's a good question. I've seen it both ways very recently at places like Lenovo. They had relationships with large companies like ThoughtWorks, as an example, where my sense is I wasn't privy to the kind of kernel of the relationship, but my sense is it's one where it's negotiated by very high level executives on both sides. And then from that kind of kernel, it propagates down and threads out. where it could feel like, hey, we've got to deal with ThoughtWorks. They do development work like this. They can do microservices. They can do AI. They also have UX researchers. They can solve all these problems. And then it becomes this kind of catalog of capabilities where you can say, for my product work, for the initiatives we're working on and the goals we're trying to hit, I need a UX researcher. I need an AI specialist. I need a team who can do data engineering. They'd say, great, we've got this contract. We've got these resources. That team's in Brazil. Does that work for you? Yeah, it does. This team's in India. Does that work for you? Yeah, I can make that work. Cool. And kind of wire it up. And then if they didn't solve your problems, it would be very challenging in an enterprise to say, I want to bring in this consultancy who I think would do a great job. They'd say you can't do that. You have to go through like the official channels. Whereas on the startup side, very recent experiences at a marketplace I worked at where they were constantly testing different consultancies all around the world who could solve problems. So it might be an offshore team in the Philippines who could do sales activities. It might be a consultancy where the leader is on the US East Coast, but his team's entirely in India and they do bespoke AI work. So building models from scratch, or a consultancy in Argentina that does data engineering and AI work. And the idea that you can cycle through testing, giving them discrete projects, saying like, all right, let's try this relationship out. Here's the scope of work for you. Oh, that's working or that's not working. Let me give you more of what's working, less of what's not, or entirely, nope, we tried it out. That's not going to work. So I would argue startups more flexibility, but also more trial and error. Like you don't have the kind of pedigree of those giant relationships that were managed that you would in an enterprise where you know, like, yep, they're ironclad. They are a global consultancy. You know that they're going to do great work, and you can kind of rely on that if you can get access to the resources.
As we wrap up our conversation, what advice would you give someone who wants to move from idea to a successful project?
I would think about it as the kind of constant philosophy I try to keep in myself and imbue to anyone I work with on product or just innovation in general. Constantly testing your ideas and assumptions. So it's this like ever evolving process of having a vision of what you think you want to do, kind of where you want to end up, that kind of castle on the hill in the distance, having an evolving set, conceptualized as a baby bird or whatever, this thing you're carrying where you say, here's my sense of what that means and how I'm going to get there. And you're constantly cross-pollinating ideas, insights, feedback, constantly showing it to people like, here's what I see. What do you see? Oh, interesting. That's an interesting idea. Or looking for inspiration, like that adjacent market or that idea over there. I can kind of take that, add some dimensionality to my idea, maybe flip it around and say it's not exactly the same, but I can totally take inspiration from that. And then from there, the idea of trying to de-risk what's the least you can do to validate you're on the right path. Like a lot of people will tell you, oh, just build it. And I've been told that in the past with things I've worked on. I argue that's the wrong answer. That's a great way to spend a lot of money for no return and just for waste. You'll learn a lot about what it's like to build something, but you won't know if you're actually building it for a relevant market for customers where it's actually solving a problem. So then you can get into things like fake it till you make it. What are the kind of guerrilla techniques you can use? Common ideas like, let me see if there is a market for this. I'll set up a simple search campaign and a landing page where I think my target audience would be searching for this sort of subject matter. And then I have my landing page as kind of a bait to catch them and validate, does anyone care about this idea I'm even thinking about? And then from there, being able to research with those sorts of customers or people like them to explore further, and then get into things like wireframes or simple prototypes, and then expand into, great, it looks like there's something here. Let me build something, but not just committing to, I've got an idea, let me build it, which is a common problem.
Scott, thanks for sharing a lot of valuable information, insights, your understanding, your vision of the future of the industry. It's really amazing. I do believe many from my listeners will find it useful. I'm wishing you good luck and all the best. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it and look forward to following your podcast in the future.
Thank you. If you enjoy our discussion and want to stay updated on future episodes, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way, you will not miss out on the new latest insights and conversations from the Devico Breakfast Bar. See you in a week.